not improved. Think about that for a second. A lot of the gadgets you cannot find in any regular store today were not phased out because something better came along. They were phased out because something cheaper to manufacture the same thing. I have been paying attention to old kitchen tools for a long time, and I keep reaching the same conclusion. We did not trade up. In many cases, we traded sideways or straight down and paid more to do it. I will tell you what each one did, why it worked so well, why it vanished, and, crucially, where you can still find one if you want it. By the end of this video, someone tries to sell you an expensive electric version of something your grandmother handled just fine with a piece of cast iron and a hand crank. Before I get into the list, the ebook guide for this channel, you need to type anything. And from here on, that same QR code stays pinned in the top right corner of the screen for the rest of the video, so you can grab it whenever you are ready. Let us get into it. Number 1 on the list is the rotary egg beater, the hand crank kind, on the side. This tool was in virtually every kitchen drawer, from around the turn of the last century well into the 1970s. You held it with one hand, turned the gear with the other, and in under 3 minutes you had whipped cream or beaten eggs to a proper stiff peak. The gear drives 2 smaller pinion gears on the beater shafts, so the beaters spin fast without the handle moving fast at all. Your wrist does almost no work. I will be honest, for small jobs. The problem is, try walking into a grocery store or even a large home goods retailer today and finding one. You will not. They are gone from regular retail. The explanation is simple. Hand crank beaters do not have a large enough profit margin to justify shelf space. An electric hand mixer costs 3 or 4 times as much and breaks down, so you buy another one. You still find these at estate sales and thrift stores for $1 or $2. Some kitchen specialty shops stock them, and they do exist online. If you find one with solid gears and no wobble in the beaters, buy it. You will use it more than you expect. Number 2 is the food mill, sometimes called a Foley mill, after one of the brands that made them popular. This is a hand-operated device with a perforated disc on the bottom and a curved blade that you turn with holes while leaving behind skins and seeds. It is the tool that made smooth tomato sauce before blenders existed. It purees and strains in a single step. A blender cannot do that. It will puree the skins right in with everything else. A food mill gives you a naturally smooth texture that is impossible to replicate with electric equipment. Applesauce made in a food mill is genuinely different from applesauce texture you get from overprocessing and smooth soups. These were common in every kitchen from about the 1930s through the 1980s. They disappeared when blenders and food processors became cheap enough for the average household. Food mills are still made, but you will not find them at a regular grocery store. Specialty kitchen shops and online retailers stock them. Expect to pay somewhere in the range of $15 to $40 for a reliable one, less at an estate sale. Look for one with at least 2 interchangeable disc sizes, a coarser one for things like chunky applesauce and a finer one for smooth sauces. Number 3 is one that surprises a lot of folks, the stovetop pyramid toaster. Before pop-up electric toasters became affordable household items, families used a simple folding metal pyramid that sat directly over a gas or electric burner. You laid a slice of bread against each of the 4 slanted sides, let the radiant heat from the burner toast one face, then flip the slices to do the other side. They cost almost nothing to make, a piece of stamped sheet metal with 4 hinged flaps, and they worked without any electricity at all. The bread toasted unevenly by modern standards, and I think that is actually part of their charm. The side closest to the heat got a deeper color. The outer edge stayed lighter. Old cookbooks from the early 20th century considered that normal and appealing. These completely vanished once pop-up electric toasters became cheap mass-market items in the mid-20th century. Camp supply shops sometimes stock a version of this still, designed for use over a camp stove, and if you go looking, you can find them. For anyone with a gas range and a drawer full of gadgets they never use, this is worth keeping an eye out for. It costs almost nothing, takes up almost no space, and works when the power is out. Hold that thought for a moment, because number 5 on this list is one I want to spend extra time on: the hand crank meat grinder. It is one of the tools I would go back and buy earlier if I could. Number 4 is the larding needle. This one has been gone from kitchens for so long that most people under 60 have never seen one. A larding needle is a long, hollow metal tool, somewhere around a foot in length, with a notch at one end to grip a strip of fat. You threaded a strip of pork fat, or bacon, or salt pork, into the needle, then pushed it straight through a lean piece of meat, leaving that strip of fat running through the interior of the roast. In the days before factory-farmed animals were bred to be as lean as possible, this was how you cooked a roast that was naturally too dry. You added the fat where the heat would render it slowly from the inside out. The result was a piece of meat that basted itself from within. Chefs still use larding needles. You will occasionally find them in professional kitchen supply shops, and they do exist online. For a Sunday roast made from a lean cut like a bottom round or an eye of round, larding genuinely makes a difference. The fat you thread in lubricates the interior of the meat during the long cook. It is not a gimmick. It is basic applied food science. The reason it vanished from home kitchens is mostly that it looks intimidating and requires a little practice. The truth is, you get the hang of it in one attempt. Now, number 5, the hand crank meat grinder. Before food processors and before butchers started selling pre-ground everything, families ground their own meat at home as a matter of course. A cast-iron hand crank grinder clamped to the edge of a table or countertop, and you fed chunks of raw meat in through the top, turned the handle, and it came out as ground meat through the front plate. These things are nearly indestructible. I have seen them passed down through 3 generations with no repairs needed. They allow you to grind to the texture you want, coarser or finer depending on the plate, and they allow you to know exactly what cut of meat went into your grind. That last part matters more than it used to. When you buy pre-ground meat at a grocery store, you often have no real way of knowing how many animals are represented in a single package. When you grind a chuck roast yourself, you know what is in there. You can also grind cold cuts, firm cheeses, nuts, and cooked vegetables for fillings. The grinder here this channel has a guide for in the ebook. If you want to go deeper on this than I can in today's video, that is exactly what the guide is for. Open your phone's camera app and scan that QR code still in the top right corner of the screen right now and get it. Cast iron meat grinders are still made, still available at specialty kitchen and farm supply shops, and they run anywhere from around $20 to $60 new. Estate sales are a great source for vintage ones that are already broken in. Number 6 is the pastry blender. This one has not vanished entirely, but it has become so rare in regular stores that most people under 40 have never used one. It is a simple C-shaped handle with 5 or 6 stiff wire loops or blades running parallel beneath it. You use it to cut cold butter or shortening into flour for pie crust, biscuit dough, or scone dough. The technique is called cutting in the fat, and it means working cold fat into flour quickly enough that it does not melt from your hand warmth. A pastry blender does this in about 90 seconds. It keeps the fat in small, separate pieces that create the flaky layers in a crust. Many people now do this with 2 knives, or with their fingertips, or use a food processor. The food processor works well enough, but it is easy to overprocess and lose flakiness entirely. The fingertip method relies on your hands being cold, which mine rarely are. A pastry blender is the most consistent method for most home bakers. These still exist at specialty kitchen shops and can be found for $3 to $8. They do not wear out. If you bake pie from scratch even occasionally, this is worth having. Number 7 is the pie bird, sometimes called a pie funnel. This is a small ceramic or aluminum hollow figure, traditionally shaped like a bird with an open beak, that you stand upright in the center of a pie before you lay the top crust over it. The open beak pokes through the crust and acts as a steam vent, letting moisture escape during baking, so the crust does not go soggy on the bottom or puff up and crack on top. It also props the top crust slightly, preventing it from sinking directly onto the filling and making the pie difficult to cut. These were common in British and American kitchens from roughly the Victorian era through the mid-20th century. They disappeared as more people moved to frozen pies and as pie making from scratch became less common at home. They are charming, they work, and they still solve a problem that nothing else quite handles the same way. You can find them through specialty kitchen retailers and at antique shops. They are inexpensive, usually a few dollars. And if you have grandchildren who like to bake with you, they are captivating. A pie made with a bird in it tends to turn out better than the same pie without one. This next gadget is good, but number 9 is the one that most folks do not see coming. Number 8 is the stovetop cast iron waffle iron. Not an electric waffle maker. A hinged cast iron mold you set directly over a gas or electric burner. You heated one side, flipped it, heated the other, and produced a waffle cooked in the direct dry heat of a flame, rather than in an enclosed electric chamber. The result is a thicker, crisper waffle with a drier texture that holds toppings without going soft. Electric waffle irons produce steam inside the unit as the batter cooks. Stovetop cast iron irons do not trap that steam the same way. You get a fundamentally different product. Grandmothers who made waffles on Sunday mornings on a gas range understood this. The waffles were not faster or easier. They required attention and the occasional flip, but they were better in the way that slow, attentive cooking often produces better food. These are hard to find in regular stores, but do turn up at antique shops and specialty cast iron retailers. Expect to pay anywhere from $20 for a worn vintage one to $60 or more for a new quality piece. Number 9, the one I promised you, is the kraut cutter, also called a cabbage slicer or a mandoline board. Not the modern adjustable blade Japanese mandoline you might have seen recently, but the old wooden-framed fixed blade slicer that farm families used specifically for shredding cabbage into fermenting crocks. These were long, flat wooden boards with 1 or 2 fixed steel blades inset at a slight angle. You slid a head of cabbage back and forth over the blades and produced thin, even shreds in seconds. The fixed blade cut more uniformly than a knife because there was no variation in wrist pressure. Uniform shreds ferment more evenly. Kraut cutters were common in German, Polish, and Eastern European immigrant households across the United States well into the mid-20th century. They disappeared as commercial sauerkraut became cheap enough that making your own seemed unnecessary. The revival of home fermentation in recent years has brought some interest back to them, and specialty fermentation supply shops do stock them. If you enjoy making your own fermented vegetables, a proper kraut cutter is worth seeking out. It is the right tool for that job, in a way that a food processor simply is not. The guide for this channel goes further into the world of old food preservation tools than I can here. If that interests you, open your camera app and point it at that QR code still pinned in the top right corner. Number 10, and this one is perhaps the most quietly useful of all, is the cherry pitter. Not the modern plastic lever action one you can still occasionally find, but the old cast iron or tin tabletop model that sat on a base with a small cup to receive the cherry, a ramrod that punched through the fruit when you squeezed the lever, and a chute that sent the pit to a separate bowl. These were designed for speed and volume. In cherry season, a person with a good tabletop pitter could process several pounds of fruit in the time it would take to hand pit 2 or 3 handfuls. Families who canned their own preserves, baked their own pies, and made their own cherry brandy needed this tool. It did a specific job so well that there was never any improvement made on the basic design: the handle, the cup, the ram, the chute. That is still how cherry pitters work, the ones that work well. What changed is not the tool, but the habit. When families stopped preserving their own fruit and stopped baking with fresh seasonal produce, demand for the serious version of this tool evaporated. You will find tabletop cherry pitters at specialty kitchen retailers and at canning supply shops when cherry season approaches. If you are serious about preserving, this is one tool that more than earns its drawer space. Here is what I keep coming back to after going through all 10 of these. These tools were not eliminated because they failed. They were eliminated because they were simple enough that no one could make much money selling them twice. The stores that carry 30 versions of an electric appliance have very little reason to stock something that costs $8, lasts forever, and does the job just as well. That is not an accident. It is a business model. You are not being served badly by accident. Before I wrap up, if you want the fuller picture on the tools and approaches I covered today, the deeper background that a video like this can only give you a taste of, open the camera app on your phone and scan that QR code still in the top right corner. It is the guide for this channel, and it goes further than I can here. So here is the practical action plan. This week, go through whatever drawer or cabinet holds your seldom used kitchen tools and ask yourself honestly, what is missing that would make the things I already cook easier? Then look at this list. If you bake, the pastry blender and the pie bird are cheap and easy to find. If you cook meat from scratch, the food mill and the hand crank grinder will pay for themselves quickly. If you preserve food at all, the cherry pitter and the kraut cutter are worth hunting down before this season passes. The thing about old tools is that someone already worked out the hard part. They already figured out the shape, the material, the mechanism. All that refinement is built in. You are just picking it back up. I would love to know which of these you already have, or which one you are going to go look for. Leave it in the comments. And if you want to see the video I did on why cast iron pans still outperform modern cookware in most home kitchens, that one is coming up next. If you found any of this useful, a subscription to this channel means you will not miss what is ahead. Glad you were here today.